currencies that you have to watch right now. But maybe we'll get a crisis in the waning months of the Biden administration, but it's very possible that the crisis is not going to happen until the next president is sworn in, whether it's Harris or Trump. But again, and I'll open this up to questions and comments that anybody might have about the debate, so we can have more of a discussion than a lecture on this basis. Um, but the big problem that I see with Harris, and Trump was correct to point this out, that Harris was raised by a Marxist and does not really believe in capitalism. Now, she can't come out and say that when she's running for president in America, but in her heart of hearts, she doesn't believe in capitalism. You know, when she says she wants to build an opportunity economy, it's because she doesn't understand that we already have one. That's what capitalism is about. It's about opportunity. The government doesn't create opportunity, the government gets in the way of opportunity. The government takes opportunity away. It's the free market capitalism that provides opportunity. But Harris doesn't know that. She doesn't understand where wealth comes from because she's never actually created any. She doesn't know why we have jobs or why we have goods and services because she's never been a part of that. She's been in politics. And when she wasn't in politics, she was a lawyer in politics, right? So she didn't really work in the real economy, and she doesn't understand how the real economy works. And her father didn't understand it because he was a Marxist professor. So, given the gravity of the economic crisis that we're facing, something that's much worse than the 2008 financial crisis, something that's going to be even worse than COVID, you don't want somebody in charge that is looking for an excuse to point out why capitalism doesn't work and use that as an excuse to move the government, the country, even further down the road to serfdom and implement even more draconian, government powers under the guise of, well, we need this government because we have to fix the problems that were caused by capitalism, when the problems are caused by government. And the only solution is to rediscover capitalism and free markets. And Donald Trump is, of the two candidates, the only one who is likely to approach the problem from that perspective. And more importantly, who's likely to be surrounded by people who will want to approach the problem from that perspective. I mean, one thing Donald Trump is not is an establishment neocon. Harris brought up the fact that Dick Cheney is supporting her, which is reason enough to vote for Trump if Dick Cheney is supporting Harris. But it doesn't surprise me that a lot of these rhinos are supporting Harris because they never were really Republicans. They really were Republicans in name only, and it proves it when they can come out and support a candidate so radical left as Harris, that how you can even pretend that you were once a Republican if you can support Harris. I mean, even if you didn't like Trump, again, I wasn't a fan of everything Trump did as a president. I like some of the things that Trump did as a president, and I like, in particular, the fact that he was an outsider and is an outsider, and that's why he's made enemies on both sides of the aisle. Because for all practical purposes, we have the Demopublicans, right? Or the Republicrats. They have more in common. The major political parties have a lot more in common. That's why they argue about nothing, because they have nothing of substance that they really disagree with. They both believe in big government. They both want to spend a lot of money. They both want a lot of regulation. They just want to spend it in different ways or to regulate in different ways. And so they don't have any real substance. So they just call each other names. But I think Trump is a breath of fresh air in that respect. And that's why so many people in the establishment on either side of the aisle don't like him. But anyway, I'm trying to look. I see a Paul there. Oh, there he is. I don't. Wait a minute. Well, how do I? Let me see. Add as co-host. Send co-host invite. Let me see if I got him in. If that's the right Paul. Paul, are you there? Did that work? Well, I don't know what happened. I sent an invite. Um, yeah, I don't think I don't think it. I didn't see anything that happened. Oh, Paul is now co-host. Paul, are you there? Yeah, I
Can
see you. You should be
you hear
able
me?
to speak. Yeah. All right. All right, everybody, meet Paul. Paul, meet everybody.
Hey, everybody.
I got you up. So your job, Paul, is to select people to ask questions or to make comments for me to respond to. And I want to hear from people who support Trump or Harris. I mean, if there's any Harris supporters here, happily to address any questions you have or thoughts you have on Harris. But basically, want to hear what other people's take was on the debate, the policies that were whatever they discussed. Any questions you have for me, or if you disagree with anything I've said, happy to have that discussion. So go ahead, Paul. Why don't you start bringing people up?
All right, I guess we'll start right from the top with Gannon Breslin. Gannon, are you there?
Do we have Gannon?
Gannon, you're on mute.
Yep, I'm here. Well, I want to start off by saying I'm marked safe. I'm a survivor of that debate. Everyone listening is too. Thank goodness we made it. I had a question more than anything than what my thoughts are, and the reason why I'm not going to say what I think about the debate is because I actually just don't think it matters. And my question to Peter is, do you think actually, I don't know, what is your percentage of people that actually watch that debate and just flip sides? Like, I'm thinking less than 1%.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really did something that was so dramatic that it caused people that had already made up their minds to change their candidate. The question is, what about people who came into the debate completely undecided, if they really didn't know? And again, I've often made this joke, but um, it's unfortunate that our elections are basically decided by the idiots because it's only the idiots that don't know who they're going to vote for, and are persuaded by the campaign commercials that are run, leading up to the election. So it's because anybody who has any intelligence, I guess, has already made up their mind. They've done some research and they know who they're going to vote for. And a 30-second ad or a bumper sticker isn't going to change their minds. The people whose minds are made up by a bumper sticker or a soundbite on a 30-second command ad shouldn't even be allowed to vote. I mean, they're just a bunch of idiots. Why are we even letting them vote? Um, but as far as but if somebody truly was undecided, I don't know. I have a hard time. I mean, I'm a bit biased towards Trump because I side more with him than Harris, so I tend to think that he was a bit stronger. He made some good points about the current state of the economy and the wars that are going on. There was no war when he was president. We were at peace. Now we're at war everywhere. And the economy is clearly in worse shape. So I think that maybe he could have picked up a few people on that basis. But I mean, I don't think it was like a watershed. I don't think it was like the Reagan Carter debate where he ended the debate. Ask yourself, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And getting into that, it wasn't that kind of performance. I mean, he didn't. He didn't. There's no major screw up on it. But I don't know. That's my take.
All right. Thanks again. Next up, no affiliation to Michael Saylor, but it's MicroStrategy Capital.
Go ahead.
MicroStrategy, you're there. Okay, they're gone. We're going to move on to Carlos Gonzalez.
Carlos, you there?
I'm here. Yes. Sorry, I missed the. I thought I heard MicroStrategy Capital or something like that, but no. Peter, appreciate you having the space. Paul for co-hosting, and I agree, Peter. I think overall that the debate really lacked substance, more of overtures of what continues to divide our country. You know, the economy, abortion, border, January 6th. You know, those things. Now, I would say this, that looking at it, because I was a two-time Trump supporter and voter, and looking at it more of a perspective of the messaging and solidifying their base.
Hello?
And can you hear me?
Hello?
Is there someone else coming across?
I just lost. Yeah, I lost everybody.
Okay, I'm still here. Peter? Can you hear me?
Hello? Yeah.
I can hear you, Carlos. I'm not sure
Okay.
what.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
going on.
We had this issue last time where I started not being able to hear people. And then the co-hosts were having to communicate to me what the people were saying. But yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I heard part of what Carlos was saying. And yeah, again, Harris brought up, the ridiculous points about the bloodbath again, which Trump could have addressed a bit better. But bloodbath or good people on both sides. I mean, these are both comments that were taken out of context by the media, and she's still repeating those lies. And also, the way Harris tried to throw in Trump's face all these convictions as if they actually prove that he's committed all these crimes and he believes he's above the law, when it was the government that broke the law in their selective prosecution. No ordinary citizen would have been prosecuted, let alone convicted, for the crimes, so-called crimes, that Trump was charged with committing. Meanwhile, it's obvious to me that the entire Biden family, right up to the big guy, Joe Biden, committed serious crimes while Biden was the vice president. Real serious crimes. And they haven't even been charged with those. Trump was charged with trumped up crimes. These were real crimes that they got away with. I mean, borderline treason. I mean, maybe you would even call it treason, what they did. So yeah, I mean, it's so. I hate the hypocrisy involved in calling somebody out for something that you've actually done worse. But I don't know. Why don't you try another person and see if I can hear them? If I can't, Paul, you'll have to just tell me what they say. Hello?
Moving on to RFK. Let's see. RFK, are you there?
Good evening, Paul, and good evening, Peter. Thank you for including me in the debate tonight. As I was watching earlier, just, bewildered. It was sort of surreal. I just wasn't included in that debate, so it's good to be here. I guess my question to Peter.
Yeah.
My question is, do you think it would be a good idea to take America's unfunded liabilities and basically plow all that money into NVIDIA?
Well, I guess it's better than putting it into Bitcoin, but I wouldn't do either.
Well, Cynthia Lummis has proposed a bill to take 5% of the Bitcoin supply over the next 20 years and basically use that to pay down the debt in about 20 years' time. I prefer the Harris plan. I think NVIDIA, Medicare, Medicaid, we just pump that up.
Yeah, well, you're doing a very good RFK impersonation. So, but yeah, I mean, I do know that there is a plan in Congress, a ridiculous idea to pay down the national debt by going deeper into debt to speculate on Bitcoin. But it's far more likely that Bitcoin will be lower in price in the future than it is today. And so such an exercise would merely put the country deeper into debt. But I don't think that that plan has any chance of being passed. It was interesting that there was nothing mentioned about Bitcoin in tonight's debate, because that was something that Donald Trump did flip flop on. So I was wondering if the ABC guys, because they did mention, some of the flip flops of Harris on fracking and insurance, health insurance, private health insurance. They could have said Trump, Donald Trump, as president, you called Bitcoin a scam, a fraud. You said it wasn't real money or currency, and he was very anti-Bitcoin. And now that he's running again, he's very pro Bitcoin. So that is a flip flop, but they let him get away with
Yeah,
that one. They
David and
didn't bring it up.
myself. David over, he convinced me to store my family's wealth in Bitcoin, and basically, it's going very well. The internet is a fascinating new frontier for America.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin hasn't done very much over this recent time. So we'll see what happens. But you can't have much in the way of a return. But anyway, Paul, you want to move on?
I remember 5 years ago when it was $3,000.
Next,
Yeah, but that's not when you bought it. So.
next up is gonna be Asteroid at Doomsday Clock. Asteroid, are you there? All right, no asteroids. So let's move on to Mike Nielsen.
Mike?
Okay.
Is
No
Mike there?
Nielsen. Now he is. Mike, you have to unmute.
How's it going there, Peter? Thanks for putting this together, and Paul, thanks for pulling me up. But Peter, I'm probably going to say, I'm a big Trump fan. I think tonight was a really bad night for him. I think all the questioning seemed to be about all of his past failures or anything that he was involved in that was questionable, and I felt like he had to continually defend himself, only to have, the moderators go back to Harris, who could jump back in and just absolutely obliterate him. And then she would always pull it back to maybe laying the groundwork for policies. I felt like she did a way better job than he did tonight. And my problem with Trump as a debater is I feel like he's always feeling personally attacked, and so he's always on the defensive. And I feel like he's very weak in laying out the policy, laying out the roadmap for where we can take what he wants to do over the next 4 years. I think he has the base. He's got the a huge base behind him. But when you're talking about those middle people, those idiots that kind of define the election, how does he pivot and make those people that we're going to essentially call the election for? How does he appeal to them when I mean, tonight was just like a really ugly show for me. It was really hard to watch, but I didn't feel like Trump did anything to turn anybody, to say, hey, vote for me because I can do this, or we're going to do this. It was just kind of the same old, just defend,
Yeah,
defend,
I mean, I
defend.
wish he'd. I mean, ABC did not, deliberately, as I said, they did not really focus on the economy and the problems in the economy, and the debt and stuff like that. But it would have been good if Trump would have been a little bit more specific and personal on the hardships that people are feeling when they're struggling to pay their rising rent, to pay their credit card bills, to buy groceries, to pay for insurance, that people are working 2 and 3 jobs when they used to have just one, and how because that would resonate. I mean, he got elected the first time because they were telling the same lies when Obama was president about how great the economy was and how we should elect Hillary Clinton to continue this great economy. And Trump was saying it's not great. The statistics are lies. Unemployment is a lot higher than they claim. These statistics are not real, and that resonated because people did not believe all of the rosy stories that were coming to them from the mainstream media and from you know the Obama administration and then the Clinton campaign. So that's what Trump has to go back to this time and talk about that things are really bad. And of course, they're worse now than they were when he was president. Not that he made America great again, but it's worse now. And people have a tendency to throw the bums out. And and Trump is not saying anything that's really controversial, like I'm going to cut Social Security, which needs to be done. Like he won't even say he's going to get rid of Obamacare, right? He's well, only if I can replace it with something that's better. Well, yeah, I mean, but he doesn't have the courage politically to say that we can't afford Obamacare, and insurance companies need to discriminate against people with pre-existing conditions. Otherwise, it's not insurance. Insurance doesn't work if you can't discriminate against pre-existing conditions. That's the very basis of insurance, right? I mean, why buy insurance if you can wait? Why buy insurance if I can buy the insurance after my house is on fire? Why buy auto insurance if I can buy it after an accident, right? So you can't have a pre-existing condition to buy insurance because then it's not insurance anymore. So people they're votes, which is inherent democracy. But I think Trump should be in a position, given how the economy is, you throw out whoever's the incumbent. James Carville. It's the economy. The worse Trump keeps on the economy is horrible. Anyway, next, Paul, want to grab somebody else?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the app or your connection, but you are getting a little bit garbled up. So just make sure that your Wi-Fi is strong. Next up, looks like
Puerto Rico,
Asteroid's
so
back.
you never know.
And give Asteroid another shot. Asteroid, are you there? Okay, and no Asteroid. We're gonna go to Michael Berry. Michael, are you there? You just unmute yourself.
Who? Hey, am I on?
Hey, you are.
Hey, cool. Peter, thank you for your focus and your tenacity. And Paul, I don't know who you are, but thank you for helping Peter in this. My question is maybe a little bit off topic. First, I'll just say, listening to the debate tonight, I would say that Harris is the better politician and Trump is the better American. That's a tough choice for people to make. But my question is this, Peter. So the yen, the Japanese yen, appreciating against the American dollar. What does that mean? That's my question. Period. End.
Well, first of all, so the Japanese yen was a very weak currency over the last couple of years because the Japanese created a huge problem for themselves in that they created a lot of inflation on purpose because they claimed that their inflation rate was too low, which was a lie. There is no such thing as an inflation rate that's too low. But the Japanese Bank of Japan kept saying that we need 2% inflation, and it was lower than that. And so they kept printing yen and buying Japanese government bonds, and they held interest rates negative for years. And now Japan has a big inflation problem that nobody really wants to acknowledge, but the people are dealing with it. And so they need to raise interest rates, but they can't because the debt to GDP is so high that if they raise interest rates, the Japanese government is going to have huge tax hikes or spending cuts in order to pay the debt, which the politicians won't do. And so the yen started to fall because the Bank of Japan was refusing to do anything about inflation. And that really, when the yen became this bottomless pit, a lot of people borrowed Japanese yen because they were losing value, and the cost of borrowing yen was very low, and it was, and you could pay it back because the yen was losing value. So it would be, you'd make money on the loan. People were borrowing yen and buying assets, whether it was U.S. Treasuries or more speculative assets like Nvidia stock or something like that. And that's the yen carry trade. Well, now that the yen is starting to rise because the Bank of Japan raised interest rates slightly, just slightly, but they still have to raise them a lot, and they haven't done it yet, but it has to happen. But now that the yen is starting to sell off, starting to rally, that's going to put a lot of pressure on people to repay their yen loans. And in order to do that, they have to sell the assets that they bought with the borrowed yen. So it's a big negative for the Treasury, long-term Treasuries. It's a negative for the Nasdaq. It's a huge problem that's brewing. But I also think that the Swiss franc is very key because the Swiss franc is also, to an extent, a funding currency, but it really is a warning sign. And the dollar is at a 13-year low against the Swiss franc. It's very close to hitting an all-time record low against that currency. And America, we have huge trade deficits. We just had the worst trade deficit in our history last month, outside of the 4 months right after the COVID reopening when it was an aberration. But our trade deficits are just enormous. And we need the world to want our dollars. And when the dollar is hitting lows, that shows that the world doesn't want these dollars. And as the dollar falls, then all of our prices, all of our import prices, all the commodity prices go way up. And that means the inflation problem gets a lot worse. So the foreign exchange markets are very
Okay.
important.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Peter and Paul.
All right. Yeah, by the way, Paul works with me. Paul is basically produces and helps me with the podcast, and he's been with me, working with me ever since he worked as a volunteer on my 2010 Senate campaign. So Paul and I go back quite a bit now, about 14 years or so.
Yep. All right. Next up is Holden Mitrione.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. By the way, the dollar is making new lows now against the yen. We'll see what happens. So the Dow futures are now down 165 points. Nasdaq futures are down a little bit more. They're down about 0.6%. Small caps are down even more. They're down over 1%. So I remember I talked on my last podcast that maybe we could have had a big drop on Sunday night. We actually didn't have that. We had a rally, but we'll see if we get the big drop on Tuesday night. Because I was thinking that the catalyst for the drop would be the yen breaking below 142. That didn't happen on Sunday night. It just happened on Tuesday night. But anyway, go ahead with your comment or question.
Oh, well, I guess I was just going to say that I think Kamala, we're both Austrian economists, but and we know that they're not talking about the debt or any of the important issues facing us right now. But I think Kamala won this debate tonight. I think Trump, just with the questions that were asked, they were asking about the past and stuff like this. But I think Kamala won this because Trump, and he was just extremely undisciplined. I think he's probably the most undisciplined politician I've ever seen. And so I think overall, I think Kamala won this.
Yeah, well, you got to remember, I mean, Trump is not a politician. I mean, he didn't enter politics until he ran for president and won. But he is a bit of a showman. I mean, he was on The Apprentice, and so he's not like he has some experience being in the public eye. He's done interviews, but yeah, I mean, he politics was not his career, and so I wouldn't, we don't need a politician. I mean, what we need is a statesman. I was hoping that Trump would have been that person when he was in office the first time, but he never lived up to those expectations because once he got power, he didn't really do anything to shake things up the way, as I said, if I was the president, if I had the opportunity that Trump did, I mean, I would have vetoed every budget that came on my desk, including the increase of the debt ceiling. I mean, I would have forced the issue, right? It would have been the buck stops with me. I would have ended deficit spending in its tracks, and I would have forced the government to slash spending. I mean, I just, unless they did it all over my veto. I mean, maybe they would have been able to do that. Maybe they could have passed everything over my veto, but that's how they would have had to done it. I would not have cooperated the way Trump did.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the out of control spending was not stopped by Trump, unfortunately, and I don't see that changing in the future. As you mentioned earlier about Obamacare, he just completely cowarded it out whenever he was asked about it, saying, "We'll replace it with something else," or "I have some idea." But of course,
Yeah, only if we get something
exactly.
better.
Like,
Like,
just say
yeah.
abolish it. It needs to go. We can't afford
Yeah.
it. But he doesn't want to talk about that. He's just trying to get as many votes as possible. But I mean,
Well, that's the politician in
exactly.
him, right? He doesn't want to alienate. I mean, that's why I forget who said it initially, but there's nothing as permanent as a temporary government program, because you know nobody wants to take away something that a voter has. So when it comes to the initial votes for Obamacare, you'll find Republicans who are willing to go against it, just like there were a lot of Republicans who were against Social Security, before it passed. There were a lot of Republicans who were against Medicare. But once it's there, none of the Republicans want to vote to get
Right.
rid of it because you don't want to take something away because people don't want to lose something they have. If it's about giving them something they've never had, okay. I mean, they could be against that. But once people feel entitled to something, and it's not an accident that they call these programs entitlements because people feel that they're owed the money, that it's theirs, right? And you can't take it away. And that's why we're on a collision course for disaster. And that's why all of these commitments are going to be, meaningless because inflation is going to destroy the value of everybody's benefits. So what good is a Social Security check that doesn't buy anything, right? What good is your Medicare if you can't get any health care with it, right? None of it's going to matter when they destroy the currency.
Yeah, it's going to be inflated away. But unfortunately, most voters they don't think long term. They don't think about the actual implications of the massive fiscal deficits and what's actually going to end up having to happen.
Yeah. Look, I watched this documentary on the Blaze that they interviewed me for that. It was fun. It was just a half hour on the PPP program, and what a disaster that was. But at the time it was proposed, just about every Republican was in favor of this ridiculous boondoggle to give away all sorts of money, no questions asked. It was an advertisement for massive fraud, and of course, even the people who qualified for the PPP fake loans, because they weren't loans when you don't have to pay them back, they're gifts. But even the people who legitimately qualified shouldn't have gotten the money because the government didn't have the money.
Right.
The government printed the money. That's why inflation accelerated. I mean, we're paying for those PPP loans now every time we go to the supermarket. Every time you pay any bill, you're covering the cost of that ridiculous program that was pretty much unanimously passed. They had one congressman, Massey, was one of, I think, 4 or 5 congressmen that were opposed to it, and everybody, including Trump, vilified him for having the
I
guts
thought
to
he
do
was
it.
the only one, and Trump bragged about how much money he spent. He's like, it's the biggest spending bill in American history, like as if it was a great thing.
No, it was a disaster. It was a
Right.
horrible thing. I mean, the whole look, although Harris wants to blame Trump for COVID, like he did it. He didn't want it. I mean, it happened while he was president, but our entire COVID response was a huge mistake. We should have done we should have did what Sweden did. And I said that from the beginning, that Sweden had it right. But it was only because Americans thought it was costing them nothing. If we didn't have all the spending, if we didn't have all the stimulus checks and the bailouts and the PPP, if the American public was given a choice, you can all stay home and not go to work, and you're just going to, lose a bunch of money, and you're going to have to stop spending, and, or, you could just go to work and risk getting sick, they would have gone to work. And, we all got COVID anyway. So I had a choice. I'm a big deal. The people who should have stayed home were the people who were very old and who had all kinds of, other conditions that made them susceptible. Yeah, they should have quarantined, but most of those people weren't working anyway. They were 70s, 80s, 90s. Yeah, they should have stayed at home. But I mean, there was no reason to keep, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds from going to work, or for keep the only reason they didn't let the kids go to school was because the teachers wanted a vacation. So the teachers unions were able to use COVID to get a massive vacation for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it was the worst combination of monetary and fiscal policy I think you could possibly imagine. Hey, yeah, I mean,
Yes.
and also,
And I said that at the time.
yeah,
I was one of the few people who said it right as they were passing it. I said, this is a disaster.
yeah. I mean, it was. You don't have to be an expert in economics to understand that if you shrink the supply and then you just flood the economy with money, what's going to happen? And I mean,
Yeah.
and also, if we didn't have the Fed, then they wouldn't have been able to pull off this nonsense anyway. I mean, it's only because we have a central bank and people don't understand that they're actually being taxed that we're able to do this in the first place.
Well, if we didn't have the central bank, the government might just do it on its own. I mean, but if we still have the monetary system that the framers envisioned, which was a private monetary system where gold and silver were money, right? So the government couldn't just create money; it had to be mined. It was gold and silver was money established, 1789. And if we still had that monetary system, yes, we none of this nonsense would have happened. In fact, had we still had that monetary system, we would have been prepared for COVID. We would have had the resources. We would have had the savings. We would have been able to take a few months off from work if we really needed to. But what happened was we got to COVID and we were all broke. Nobody had a rainy day fund. Nobody had any money saved up. We were drowning in debt. We fought World War II. I made this point. The government borrowed money from the public to pay for World War II because the public had savings. The public has no savings now. The government can't borrow from the public, so the Fed has to print money.
Exactly. And to also echo your point, like Trump was saying that we had the greatest economy in the history of the world whenever we were president. And then he also like talks out of both sides of his mouth whenever COVID brings up. He's like, we avoided a depression that would have been the likes of 1929. Well, if we actually had the greatest economy, wouldn't have we been able to get out of that with our savings?
Yeah, well, again, Trump talks in extremes. Like he was the best and Biden is the worst. We had the greatest economy ever, and now we have the worst economy ever. So it's extremes, and I just think that's the marketing. That's puffer. That's how he sold his steaks. Trump steaks, the greatest steaks in the world. I mean, were they the greatest steaks? Probably not. But when you're trying to sell steaks, yours are the greatest. So I think that Trump is selling himself the way he would sell a product, and so he's exaggerating, how great it was. Um, you know, I mean, whether that's going to work or not, I mean, we'll see. That's the strategy. But I mean, I think that the economy is bad enough that he should be able to win. Um, but but as I agree that I mean, that debate, I don't think helped him much, and so it might have hurt if people were expecting Harris to make a major blunder. And there may not be another debate. I mean, that might be the only one we have, because I think now that Harris has had a debate, I don't know what the upside is to agree to another one, because she could say, "Hey, I did a debate," um, because that would just be another chance for her to screw up.
Yeah, I wouldn't take a debate if I were Kamala, and I think this was probably the best thing that could happen to her from a campaign standpoint. So I think Trump's going to win. Both of them would be horrible, but I think Trump's going to win. But I mean, it'll probably be close.
Yeah, I mean, there, apart from the economic stuff, the broader social issues on freedom of speech, the wars, um, the woke nonsense, and a lot of the stuff that the left is pushing. I mean, that's reason enough alone just to want to have Trump in there, because he's going to push back against all that. I mean, he's not going to stop the economic crisis, but at least he could stop that. And that's not insignificant, because those threats to freedom of speech, and being able to criticize the government. I mean, that's really what they're trying to do with this misinformation. They're trying to silence government critics. And that's where our freedom of speech is the most important. It's to criticize government. And if government can say you can't criticize it because they can claim that you're spreading disinformation, well, then that's it. I mean, you're just one step to a totalitarian society. Once they're able to do that. So just to have Trump fight back against that, and a lot of guys. That's why guys like Elon Musk, who hasn't necessarily been Republican, but now that I pay attention to his quotes, it's pretty obvious to me that Elon Musk is a libertarian. So I don't know why he was voting Democrat all these years anyway, unless he's finally just discovered these points, which he may have done. That's a typical journey. I mean, generally when people are younger and more naive and idealistic, they start off being more to the left, more socialist. But as they get older and have more real world experience and more wisdom, they move right, and they become more free market. And I'm putting in this context libertarianism on the right. Um, you know, and so I think it's clear that that's where Elon Musk is. And the fact that Trump, you know, you know, has or Elon has Trump's ear is a good thing.
Well, I want to say, Peter Schiff, like I've been listening to you for a couple years, and I'm a young guy. So before I really saw your work, I was socialist, and so like I want to say thank you for showing me the ways of the market economy. I read your book. It's How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes. Whenever I was young, and so I want to. I know it's off topic, but I'm sure I'm speaking for many in the audience that listen to you, and so I just wanted to say I really appreciated that. And also, with the situation at hand, I mean, I don't know. I think we're still probably going to have free speech if we elect Kamala Harris, or if not if we if the people elect Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I just I can't hold my nose and vote for Trump. He's just so bad on economics, and he's continuing to he funded Ukraine and Israel whenever he was president. So
Yeah, well, I voted for Trump the last time I was able to vote, which was 2016. I can't vote anymore. I normally vote libertarian, but I would encourage you to vote for Trump, because I do think that, when it comes to the lesser of the two evils, I think that Harris is way worse. So even if Trump is not your ideal candidate, and he's not my ideal candidate, um, I mean, he deep down, I mean, I think he means well. I mean, he cares about the country, and he may do the right thing. When push comes to shove, there's no way Harris is ever going to do the right thing, ever. But anyway, thanks for your thoughts. Let's move on to someone else, Paul.
thanks, Peter.
All right, next up is Marwan. You there, Marwan?
Anyone?
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it's kind of like a lose-lose for Trump because if you take the average left voter, they don't really understand economics. So anything he says that's economically sound, they're gonna disregard and say that it's bad because he's not giving them more benefits or something. And then if you look at the social aspect, anything that Kamala says is obviously more liberal and social, and Trump is the opposite of that. I mean, everyone says he's racist, et cetera, et cetera. So nothing he says can really switch anyone, I don't think. And I think that he just puts himself I mean, tonight, and I'm a Trump voter, by the way. I'm not speaking from a Democratic perspective. But even tonight, I don't think he did that well. I don't think he was on his feet as much as he usually is. I mean, when Kamala asked him, "Do you have a plan for healthcare?" He was like, "No, I mean, I have a plan, like some concepts of a plan." I thought he'd bullshit his way out of that better, but I don't know. I thought that it was kind of like he didn't really do that well.
Yeah, I mean the best plan for healthcare is to get the government out of it, right? And to introduce more free market forces. Yeah, he said I'm not president yet, so I don't have a plan. Well, yeah, he was president for 4 years. I mean, you figured you'd have some idea as to what your plan is. But my plan would always be to get the government out of the way, to recognize how government has screwed up healthcare,
Yeah,
and to let the free market solve the problems of healthcare. I mean, if you want quality healthcare at a low price, the way you get that is through free market capitalism. You don't get it through a government program. Government programs do not create um, quality and low prices. They don't create abundance. They create scarcity. And so he didn't really articulate that. And the only one, Harris did promise, I'm going to give money to people who want to start a business. I'm going to give money to people who want to start a family. So, people will respond to that. Of course, um, the government doesn't have any money. The government is broke. So where is Harris going to get the the money to give to families and business owners? And of course, most of these businesses that are going to qualify for these credits are going to be fake businesses. People are going to start phony businesses to get these tax deductions. But where's the money going to come from? The Fed's going to have to print it, right? So she's just promising to create inflation. I mean, what's such a great plan? Yeah, what's your plan? My plan is to create a bunch of inflation, right? I'm gonna just give people money to spend, right? That's not a plan. That's the disaster that we're suffering now.
yeah. I was gonna say that if he said that he was gonna abolish healthcare or whatever, it would. I feel like it wouldn't really do much if he just abolished healthcare and nothing else. So we wouldn't really gain anything out of that. I think it would be better for him to just say that he was gonna create something new, in my opinion. And what you're saying is right. I completely agree. But I just wanted to say a little bit off topic that I'm also gonna say what the other guy said, which is that I'm really young. I'm 18. And I've been listening to you since I was 14, and I really appreciate everything that you do. You've taught me a lot, and words I can't thank you enough in my words, but thank you very much, Peter Schiff. I really appreciate you.
Oh, that's great. Like to hear that, especially since you were listening at 14. What about your parents? Have they listened?
Yeah. My my dad is kind of upset because he didn't buy a house because you said that the housing market was going to crash and everything like that. But no, he
Well, that was a long
yeah
time ago.
I know.
'Cause
Um uh
what I've been telling people, what I was telling people, when interest rates were down at zero and you can get a mortgage for 3 or 4%, I was saying, yeah, go buy a house as long as you get a 30-year mortgage, because I said the mortgage is going to be very valuable when interest rates go
yeah
up. And that's exactly what's happened. Interest rates have gone up because I thought people were going to make money as debtors, not as homeowners, and that's exactly the situation. I mean, because the rates are probably not going to go down that low again. But yeah, I mean, I told people, it depends on where you live. I mean, there were some markets that I wouldn't have bought into because they were so overpriced. But by and large, the mortgage money was so cheap, and especially people could buy with very little down. So to me, it was a good deal just because of the, being able to pay back the money with inflated
Yeah.
dollars.
I wanted to say one more thing before I hop off, which is that I was actually in a space before the debate started with a bunch of Democrats, and I didn't know that I was in a space with Democrats. I thought it was just like, normal people. So I went in there and I was like, yeah, I think that, socially Trump might be a little bit better, but economically they're both kind of the same because they're between a rock and a hard place. And they were like, well, don't you see the economy now? We're doing so good, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, they just revised the jobless claims up 800,000 and the inflation is up. And, they were giving me all these sources like, no, inflation just dropped down 3%. And I was like, they were like, give your sources. They didn't revise them down 800. And I was like, they completely don't know what's going on. So it's like we've detached so far from any reality or like fundamental logic. It's just social politics at this point. Like no one, you know what I mean? But anyways,
Well, the media has certainly been trying to spin things as if things are getting better because they want to, give that credit to, Harris. But I mean, most voters know that they're in bad shape because they see how much debt they have, they see how little savings they have, they see what the cost of living is, and they know that they're working 2 or 3 jobs, and they don't want to have all these jobs. And people know that they're not going to retire. So um, when people go into the polls to vote, I mean, those are the things I think for a lot of people that are gonna weigh on their decision
yeah.
making. But anyway, thanks for listening, and I hope you continue to listen, for many
I
years.
always will. I always will.
I,
Thank you so much, my
I,
friend.
Next up is Michael.
hello.
He didn't
Michael, are
bring
you with
anyone
me?
new up.
All right, we'll move on to Logic Gate.
Yeah. By the way, just looking at the website predicted.com, uh, Harris is up to 57 cents. That's up 3 cents over before the debate, I think, and Trump is down 4 cents to 47. I remember watching that after the first debate where Trump shot up and Biden dumped because it was so obvious what a horrible job Biden did. But this time, I guess again, I think it was. I think Harris exceeded the low expectations that people had for her, and so in that respect, she won in that she didn't do as horribly as people thought she would do. She was okay, right? She didn't just fall apart. Who's up next?
I think I'm up. Hey Peter, it's very nice to meet you. I've been a fan of the podcast since the low 500, so I've been listening for a very long time. Um,
Oh, you're talking about gold then, right? Price
yeah,
of gold.
and I want to say, first of all, I'm Canadian, so I don't really have skin in the game when it comes to U.S. politics, other than our central banks kind of operate in lockstep together. But like, I want to stay away from tonight's debate, as I think it was a complete dumpster fire, and it was probably one of the worst showings for Trump that I've seen in a long time. He appeared to be like unhinged and very rattled by, being attacked obviously by the moderators and Kamala. But anyway, my question is more so in regards to interest rates. It appears that, recently Canada diverged away from the US central bank and actually started lowering interest rates again. So it appears they're going to kick the can down the road once more. And I'm curious, what do you think the timeline is on the housing market crashing and stock market crash, coming? Because like you've said in multiple recent podcasts that you've kind of gotten like the timeline a little bit off when it comes to when things are going to crash, since they're able to manipulate the economy with the interest rates. So what are your thoughts on that? When do you think?
Yeah. Again, the stock market should crash because it's extremely overpriced. and interest rates should go a lot higher, which would, accelerate that collapse. But again, the government is going to pursue inflationary policies that will likely mitigate the severity of any downturn in the market. And in fact, they will be motivated to try to prop the markets up to the extent that they are really starting to collapse. So that's why I think it's the currency that is what's really at risk. Because the way they prop up the housing market, the way they prop up the stock market is by sacrificing the dollar. And that includes the Canadian dollar gets sacrificed by the Bank of Canada. The pound gets sacrificed by the Bank of England, right? The euro gets sacrificed by the ECB. So all these governments are going to sacrifice the purchasing power of their currency to prevent, financial crisis, default, deflation, whatever, so this is where we're headed, right? But I think that what it really means is it's the beginning of the end of the fiat system. That it's going to, really shake things up and cause major changes in the global monetary system. But the reason I'm so bearish on the dollar is because I know the dollar is the epicenter of the current system, and this system is going to go. And this is the system where the dollar is the reserve currency, and that means America gets to run enormous trade deficits where we can print money and export it and import all kinds of goods that we didn't have to produce. And so we're the primary beneficiaries of this horrible global fiat system. And so when it comes to an end, America has the most to lose, right? Because we benefited the most from the system. We took advantage of it. We lived, an extravagant life beyond our means. And so that has to come to an end. Now, I think we would actually all have a better life in America had we had sound money and had, all along, I think we'd have a much higher standard of living. But what we have been able to do is get away with, not producing, having this enormous government with these enormous deficits that should have been a lot more destructive, but that weren't because of the reserve status of the dollar. But all of that destruction is going to become obvious, once the bottom drops out of the dollar and the whole phony economy that we built on the dollar's reserve status, comes crashing down.
So when do you think is the breaking point? Because we're at $36 trillion of national debt for the U.S. Like, when is the breaking point? When will?
Yeah, I don't know because we as far as I'm concerned, we passed it a long time ago. So it's like we're already living literally on borrowed time. So it could break any moment. You know, it could break tonight, right? I don't know. I mean, probably not, but one of these days it will, right? I mean, if it's not tonight, it's going to be a night, right? We can't be too far off from a major collapse. We'll see what happens later tonight. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we get a bigger drop. I see Bitcoin is, you know, looking like it might crack. I mean, it didn't crack the last couple of days. It rallied. It's starting to sell off now with the stock market futures. They haven't quite made a new low yet. We're still about where we were. Dow futures down 150 and Nasdaq futures, they're about the same, but the dollar yen is still right on the lows. I mean, all these markets I think are going to be correlated. We're at 141.32, so we're down 0.8%. So this is the low for the yen so far, and we'll see if it. I mean, if it cracks through 141, I think if we go down another handle, that could be problematic. I mean, let me see where the Nikkei futures are. Where's the S&P? Where is that? I don't know, but I'm scrolling through these, but let me grab another
So
question.
actually, I just have one in
All
here.
right.
So recently, Trump has brought in other people like Elon Musk into his campaign, RFK
Mhm.
Jr. And like